All right, y'all.
Am I the frame?
Yeah, you are.
Oh, okay.
No, it's just about me. Just me.
I know it's gonna
Just
be
me
audio.
a voice, whatever. So we wanted to have this conversation because we just feel like there's too few conversations happening out there. You'll see that
Civilized ones.
civilized conversation. Thank you. That's kind of what I would consider a conversation versus just screaming at
Default,
each other.
Yeah, it's scary that we have to like say that.
I know, it's true. You're right. You're right. And yeah, I think that's exactly why we wanted to do this. So there's lots going on in the country today. There's lots we could talk about. We could be here for days talking, but we're just going to sort of start a conversation. Disclaimer, neither of us are the most educated on any of the issues that we'll be speaking on. We're just two people who care and think it's important to see people discussing this, particularly people who don't necessarily see eye to eye. So you'll notice that Kaz and I don't necessarily see eye to eye on everything. That should be okay. That should be part of rational conversations, constructive conversations, solutions-based conversations, and yeah.
And peaceable disagreements.
That's right. Peaceful disagreement should be something we embrace and celebrate, right?
Exactly, right? It's like, I mean, even with my own girlfriend, like, we agree to disagree on many things, and it's like, it doesn't change our relationship. It's just something different, you know?
Yeah, I wonder why. What do you think is the reason why that is so lacking? You know, one of the you sent me that, or I don't know if you sent it, but that speech by the congressman from Tennessee that Byron Rogers posted recently. He's a Democrat who, it turns out, actually was pushed out of the Democratic Party because he spent too much time reaching across the aisle. And it was sort of disheartening to find that out, that that would be frowned upon,
Right.
because I think we need more of that right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's weird because it seems to be very agenda driven. Like, I don't know, from my I mean, it's weird because people think very in bipolar options only.
Mm-hmm.
It's like Republican, Democrat, and
Right.
like, if you're on this team, like there's no...
You're on that team.
You're on that team, and
Right.
that's that. And if there's any fraternization
Mm-hmm.
on the other side, that's like, you're not supporting our team?
Right.
It's like, well, no.
Well, it kind of goes both ways. It's like, you know, you could have a conversation with the other team, but as soon as they find out that you don't agree with all the issues on that side, then
Right.
then you're sort of shunned or
Right.
criticized.
Well, then that cancel culture comes
Mhm.
into play.
Huge.
Big time.
Yeah. So you were saying, what did you say, agenda-driven rather than sort of human?
Yeah,
Center.
I mean, it just seems like there's bigger forces at play that want this division happening.
Yeah. Agreed. 100%.
And I wouldn't be able to tell you specifics about who or what,
Yeah.
per se. I have my own ideas.
Sure.
I mean,
Yeah, sure. I think we all have ideas. It's probably a little bit above our pay grade to point fingers and call that
speculate.
out, but I think you're right. There seems to be some underlying somebody's enjoying this.
Yeah, there's definitely people benefiting from this, and
Mhm.
it's not the general public.
No, it's not. Yeah, we're suffering, and it looks like there could be more suffering to come. I mean, things don't seem to be calming down very much, and I do not have high hopes that somehow this election is going to calm things down, right?
It's gonna get far worse.
It's going to get worse. Yeah, what are your sort of biggest concerns going forward? Again, no matter who wins the election, what's your biggest concern for what's coming up?
Just that it starts in, obviously you see most of the issues, other than hot flashpoints like in Kenosha,
Mhm.
Wisconsin, where those incidents happen that spark something and then it grows. But most issues you see happening in big cities, because big cities are melting pots. You have intermingling of very different people just due to like you said, proximity to people and population density.
Mhm.
So my fear is that there's this growing voice of like, you're either, if you're not with us, then you're the enemy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you're not allowed to be a bystander, or like, even if you're the whole like silence is violence thing.
Yeah.
And I get the intention behind that, but that's being applied to anybody that doesn't speak up or join their side.
That's right. Yeah, that's been a really big issue, that you're sort of not allowed to.
Hi.
Hey,
What?
go around that way, please. You're not allowed to hold viewpoints that don't sort of meet the party line.
Right.
Which is unfortunate, especially when those viewpoints are so extreme. And so now it gets to the point, it goes back to cancel culture, a discussion that takes place somewhere in the middle of those two extremes is now not only not sanctioned, but somehow is evil.
Well,
right?
you're being, if you're not totally with us, like you could be in the middle of an issue, like, oh, I can see both sides, whatever, I don't necessarily agree totally with you, and I don't totally agree with them, or whatever. Even if you're mildly neutral, it's like, if you're not totally with them, you are shoved into enemy territory.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, they draw the line right there, and you're now in that side. It's like, oh.
Well, and it's kind of funny because it perpetuates that then, right?
Exactly.
Because if you have an interaction with somebody on that side and they react that way to your views and push you over, now all of a sudden you start feeling affinity with that other side. You're like, oh, well, I don't like what you're about, so I must feel like I must be one of them.
It's the classic psychological tactic of othering.
Othering, yeah, that's huge. That is so much othering going on right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny, these terms are just getting thrown around now. It's like, these terms left and right have become the name of the teams,
right?
And that is the label by which you other.
Or like fascist, anti-fascist,
right?
Or like racist, not like
anti-racist,
yeah, you're like anti-racial justice. I'm like, no, I mean, it's just
yeah. It's one of the things that's so interesting about these two polarized sides is that there's zero room for the actual complexity that is inherent in every single issue that we're talking about.
Well, there's a lot of gray.
Yeah, there's a ton of gray.
There's a lot of gray, but people don't like the gray, and so they're like forcing everything into black and white territory.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I don't know what we do about that unless we sort of choose as a country to show up and actually address the problems, because I'll tell you what, we're not really addressing the problems right now, right? Breaking windows and spray painting buildings and burning cars is not a solution.
Yeah.
It's not a solution.
Well,
and
it delegitimizes your cause.
It does, and that's so
derails
unfortunate about that, about what's happening in that arena. For all the people who are protesting some very real injustices,
Sure.
Their cause is being, as you said, delegitimized because of the way that they're responding to it. And I think that was another great thing about the congressman. I wish I could remember his name now, from Tennessee.
Not Massey, right? No, Massey.
No, he was a African American. He was saying that he was talking about his father in the civil rights movement being in the March on Washington, and saying, that Martin Luther King's speech, talking about he wants his children's grandchildren to be judged based on the content of their character, not the color of their skin. And that what we're seeing out there right now is a poor display of content of character.
Right. Well, I mean, for that discovery of content of character, you have to have conversations with people.
Yeah.
And if you're othering people from the beginning just based on who they are, even like kind of what they say in the first kind of few things, then you don't get to go deeper. You're already decided that they're the enemy. I don't have to listen to anything they say. Anything they might have had a valiant conversation is now like worthless.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's true. And
Yeah, it's true. Sorry.
That was Tony's Frank's daughter, Yana.
Right,
All right,
exactly.
Sorry.
But it looks just like her, right?
Yeah.
So,
Right here.
Child number 2.
yeah, child number 2, walking through the situation. So, the other interesting thing that he said is, based on this idea of we want to judge people based on the content of their character, not the color of their skin, and yet the whole conversation right now is about color of skin.
Right.
And that, in a way that is, on some level, defeating the essence of the argument, which is we are all human beings,
Right.
and we have problems. We have real problems in this country that we need to solve. How are we going to solve them?
Right. Well, it's, what was it? I was gonna say, in talking about the differences, this is my personal view, where I heard something actually really funny today, and it's kind of like it's a jab on both sides, but basically it's saying, Republicans think if you're a Democrat, you're just dumb, right?
Uh-huh.
But if you're, and the Democrats, they think, or they believe that Republicans are evil.
Yeah.
And there's that difference of degree of like, you can be dumb and then we don't care. We're
Yeah.
gonna leave you and your devices.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're evil, then it's like something we had to deal with.
Right.
Interesting.
Interesting. That is a super interesting point, because there's a lot of that going on right now too.
Yeah.
And I think this is, I'm just going to use this as an example.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of those places that I'm somewhat ignorant. But, I've said this to you before. There's a concern for me about taking something like Antifa and sort of blowing it up in the argument to create an enemy that one must fight against, to give one a crusade to take up, when maybe the threat is not as big as we think it is. And I don't mean that the views of a group like Antifa, and again, I can't say because I don't know that much, but I mean just even really in pure numbers and their ability to organize and create the kind of chaos that we think they want to create.
I disagree, just because it's come out recently today that there's been a DOJ investigation into who's funding them.
Yeah.
Because they're literally being flown on private planes, on buses. They're being bussed in from different places, like hundreds and thousands of them, just being dropped off. And they're being funded with bulletproof vests, ballistic gear, and they're like, okay, so, I mean,
Right.
where's this
money
coming from, and how are you getting all this equipment? And they're very highly organized. They're not centralized, they're organized. There's a difference.
Right, totally. Well, that's interesting. Yeah, I didn't know about that. I'd be curious to know more.
There's an official investigation, because people like me are like, what has happened?
Yeah. Well, I remember there was it was right at the beginning of all this, right after George Floyd was murdered, that there was that pallet of bricks that showed up on the street. That was crazy.
Yeah.
Clearly that was that was by design. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
What was it? In going back to just the differences, and this libertarian guy was like, as a libertarian, I felt free. I was willing to give the other side the freedom to say and do what they want, because that's how I wanted to be treated.
Yeah.
And he's like, and I feel like the resurgence of kind of the right.
Yeah.
Because so far I feel like the right has been comparatively very quiet. We're not happy. It's we're watching things happen, and because we're very for mostly, my point of view, the right, and that's such a broad term and I hate using it.
Yeah.
But, because I know there's crazy right people too. That want to force their views on everybody. But, the right in general is we may not agree or believe what you believe, but that's okay, you do you, And then so he was saying That's what I believed, and I tried to extend that freedom and understanding to the other side.
Mm-hmm.
But then but then I realized like they would never stop trying to destroy me because of my beliefs.
Right.
So it's like, where do you go from there?
Well, and you say that because of what you're seeing on the streets right now,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of destruction of property and things
Yeah,
like that.
I mean, there's like, now we're seeing struggle sessions. Have you seen those?
Mm-mm.
So there's, you know what a struggle session is?
No.
So in Mao's revolution, China,
Mm-hmm.
it was like the four, what do you call it? The four olds,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So when that cultural revolution happened, the struggle sessions where basically you were shamed in front of thousands and beaten and
Mm-hmm.
dragged through the streets and
Mm-hmm.
made to be like, you had to wear shameful clothing with shameful words, and you had to
Right.
publicly denounce your beliefs,
Right.
right? So now we're seeing that
Mhm.
where this group came into an outdoor eating area, and this lady with a microphone was like, you know, if you believe in BLM, like raise your fist or whatever,
Mhm.
you know. And it's like, it's groupthink, right? So
Yeah.
it's like, and of course, you know, everybody who wanted to avoid that situation
Yeah.
raised their hands, but except for this one couple, one
Right.
dude,
Right.
and he was surrounded and
Mhm.
screamed at and
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
in his face.
Right. Right.
I mean, like that is communist 101.
Yeah. What's really interesting, I mean, it's, you know, I don't even know if I'd call it communism. I'd just call it sort of, you know, that's the social animal that is the human being at its lowest version of itself,
Right.
coming out. You know, that's a really interesting
I can
point.
show you the video, and it's like it's so shocking.
Yeah, I had a
And it doesn't extend just to like men. There was a woman who had the same thing happen.
Right. You know what's interesting to me about that is that I would love to ask the people who gathered around to shame this couple if they truly believed that this
Is making it better.
is going to actually change their minds.
Right.
Because what is it going to do?
Mm.
It's going to push them further into their beliefs, further away from what this mob
Is
sort of
trying to
hopes to accomplish.
Right.
So again, it's not a solution,
Mhm.
and that's what I'm seeing. Because I think, again, like I said, there are some real problems right now that need to be addressed when it comes to race, when it comes to socioeconomic issues. I mean, the list goes on. Let's
Right.
not even start talking about environmental issues, but this is not a solution. This is just not a solution. To surround a person who doesn't believe as you do and try and shame them into believing what you do will never work. They may say they believe it just to get out of a bad situation, but do they
It's
really
just-
believe it?
I feel like there's a lot of anger that people do not know how to properly express or deal with, and when you combine that with those same group of people with the same mindset of like I'm pissed off,
Mm-hmm.
and you put them in a mob together,
Yeah.
that's the
what- yeah.
monster that grows.
Well, and somehow we've given. There was another post recently that I saw that was a quote from a sheriff. It might have also been something that Byron Rogers posted. But essentially, the idea, and I think we can all look around and see this, is that somehow we've just given ourselves permission to be fucking assholes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think this is at the base. This is some sort of a misconstrued understanding of what the word freedom means.
Mhm.
That somehow we think in this country now, all of a sudden, we think that just freedom means, well, I can do whatever the fuck I want.
Mhm.
You can't tell me what to do.
Mhm.
But that's not actually what freedom means. Not as a state. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so yeah, there's this sort of permission that people have gotten to just spew their emotions, their unchecked emotions, all over those around them.
Mhm.
Other people, property, you know. Again, I mean, that's a deep-rooted issue
Mhm.
that more yelling and screaming is not going to solve.
For some reason, and that's the weird thing to a lot of us. It's like we see this and we're like, and that's why you're kind of seeing this big pushback and resurgence again on the right.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I mean, that's driving gun sales. You can tell. It's like,
well, it's not just the rights buying guns now.
yeah.
You know?
Well, I mean, it's everybody. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But truly, it's like us just being like, you know, hey, we're warning you.
Yeah.
You know, like.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. I mean, let's talk a little bit about Kyle and what happened in Kenosha. You know, this is an area that I know that we probably won't see eye to eye on, but I think it's an important thing to discuss because it goes to exactly that. And I think there's a lot of people who feel like that, who feel like, you know, I've told you once, I've told you twice, like, I'm not going to tell you again.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's sort of the idea behind, how would you classify, if we wanted to just use a broad term to classify people like that group that were out there? Some people refer to them as militia, you know, Boogaloo Boys, all these different names. What could we call them that would be an appropriate groups who sort of band together?
Yeah, just
like
armed groups, like armed libertarians usually.
Okay.
Because they're not exactly a fan of cops per se, because that's an authoritarian state thing, and they don't like that.
Right.
You know, most of those people are very libertarian in their beliefs. Yes, there are some like people who like to hitch onto that are like racist assholes, and they need to be like, as soon as those people are found, they need to be shoved to the side and be like, no, dude.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it has really, for us, has nothing to do with race and everything to do with the power of the state and how that's used against the public.
Okay.
Right.
So you made a couple good points there. One I want to highlight, which is when you find those sort of hitchhikers onto a movement, they need to be thoroughly called out.
Yeah.
And that's the same true for Black Lives Matter, right? It's like, you know, I'm not seeing the Democrats do a good enough job either about drawing a distinct line between what, you know, and the media's to blame because they just refer to everybody as a protester. Well, clearly that's ridiculous, right?
Of course. Mostly peaceful.
Right, mostly peaceful. So I think that goes for both sides, right? And I don't think either side's doing a very good job right now of calling that out. And it's hurting everyone.
True.
And because it's, again, it goes back to othering. It's easy to write off somebody's belief if you see the extreme ends of the spectrum. Then you don't have to listen to anybody, or you think you don't. So so what happened in Kenosha, you know, I think we talked about this before, and I saw the video that you sent, which I really appreciated because I think I would have jumped on the bandwagon pretty quick. It's easy to want to think that a bunch of extremist motherfuckers just showed up with guns looking to start shooting people. And, you know, I saw the video, I saw kind of what happened, as much as you can tell from that video, that he was clearly being attacked, etc. And that what he was doing was in protection of himself. Now, where I differ is, you show up bringing guns to any sort of situation, any sort of hot situation like this, the guns are asking to be used. I mean, right, we all learn that, like, you better not draw your weapon unless you're willing to fire it, right?
And so I agree with that. But is carrying drawing your weapon? Openly carrying is openly carrying, drawing your weapon. I mean, for me, looking at a situation like that, I'd say 100% yes. Interesting, okay.
Because what it comes back to for me is, what did he expect? What did any of those people expect?
They expected that show of force to be a deterrent.
Yeah, unfortunately it didn't work like that.
But it did. How many people of those group use their firearms for the purpose they brought them for? I don't say the purpose, but the potential purpose they were going to be used for.
Is it just one? Is that correct?
As far as I'm aware, Kyle was the only person who used his rifle at night.
Yeah.
Or even pointed it at anybody.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and so let me ask you this. Do you think that had he not been, and now look, we have to agree also that there are all sorts of subtle psychological factors that play into this, to the answer to this question, but do you think if he had been there in a different capacity, not openly carrying, that he would have been targeted in the same way?
That's an interesting question. Probably not. And here's my theory. So Rosenbaum in that video was the guy, the short dude in the red, who was antagonizing.
Yeah.
And if you need reference for this, you need to go look and watch those videos.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. You really do.
But so let me start at the beginning. Kyle was a Kenosha lifeguard. Okay, and he was done with his work, and he went to go volunteer to clean the graffiti off of a high school, or his high school, or a high school. I don't know, but a high school. And then during that time, some of his friends, or he was asked by either a local businessman or the guys that were defending the business, said, "Hey, we need help. Can you come?" And then because he's a lifeguard, he has a medical kit, and he wanted to go help and give medical aid and stuff like that. So when he got there, he was given, because of the seriousness of the scene, he was giving this AR for protection.
Oh, so he didn't bring the gun there?
No, that's a very common misconception, is that people think that he brought it with him, and that's why there's like this, people put intent behind, like evil intent behind his actions. He's like, oh, he brought a gun to the protest because he wanted to shoot people. No, no, he literally went there to give medical aid, and he was given this rifle to help the group that was defending the businesses, but also for himself. Because this shit's getting serious, like it's blowing up, I guarantee if you took anybody and dropped him in the middle of that scene and be like, hey, see what's going on right now? Would you like a firearm?
Yeah, right. That's a funny thing, because I think there's a lot of people who could watch this video and be like, fuck, no, that's not true. How many of you have bought firearms in the last 4 months, right?
When you call 911 and you're like, and they say, we can't help you right now.
Yeah.
You're on your own.
Well, and that gets into a whole nother thing of defund the police and all that, which is a whole other can of worms, but...
well, let me continue.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Quick. So what happened was the police pushed, because then again, like the curfew was at 8 p.m. And of course, both sides were not gone by 8 p.m. So the police, and the owner owned 2 gas stations and repair shops, which is the one you see in the video, right? His other business was torched, it's just gone. Poof. And he was like, I gotta save my business. Like, this is how I live, that's how I make money. Like, I gotta feed my family.
Sure.
Like, you know what I mean? By extension, this is my
life. Do you know anything, as an aside, do you know anything about insurance coverage for situations like this?
So what's interesting, a lot of them, insurance is covering some, but here's the kicker. People are quoting them like obscene amounts of money to clean, to take away it's like trash removal. It's like rubble removal.
And so that's something that the insurance company will not pay for?
No.
Okay. That'd be interesting to learn more about that.
There's specifically a guy who was on the side of the protesters. He was like his business, he was watching TV, he was watching his place go up in flames.
Right.
And he was like, it's okay, like this is an injustice, like we need to right it, like what's a building, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then a couple weeks later, then he got like, not as much as the building was worth, obviously, but got some money, but then he was quoted this I don't know if it was an accurate number or whatever, but all the money he got back from the insurance company was gone just in cleanup. So now he cleaned up an empty lot to rebuild.
Right, to have to rebuild on his own. Yeah. Interesting. So anyway, continue, sorry. So they went to protect this.
So they went to protect business, right? And in the videos, there's several videos of Kyle himself being interviewed. And they're like, why are you here? He's like, oh, I'm just, I have a medical kit. I'm here to provide aid. And he said to whoever needs it. And there's video of him helping, I think, other protesters. It's not like he had no qualms or no issues with either side per se. I don't think he picked a side just by having a firearm. I think that was just personally for his protection. I mean, this kid's 17. Keep that in context, and so he's helping protesters, and then the police pushed the crowd past the gas station, or I forget how it works, but basically he couldn't go back to where he was wanting to go, past the police line. And then, so he was stuck at the gas station, and then, and in the video you can see the other militia guys. They were trying to defend the station. There's a big crowd. There's pushing and shoving from the other, from that Rosenbaum, the guy in the red,
Mhm.
and he's for whatever reason, he's extremely agitated.
He is very
and
agitated.
he's being super aggressive.
Yeah.
And in the video, you can see the leader. I forget his name is like Luke, but he's pulling back his own dudes. He's
Yeah,
like,
I saw that.
he's like, hey, let's not engage this right now.
Yeah,
like,
totally.
why are we getting into shoving matches? You
Yeah.
know, this is not
Yeah.
what's going on. And then later on, they light a dumpster on fire, and they push this toward the gas station.
Mhm.
Like it's like in flames. It's supposedly, I don't know if this is confirmed or not. I don't think. I forget the lawyers released the thing, but supposedly one rumor is like he was the one who put it out.
Who was?
Kyle.
Okay.
Well, he grabbed a fire extinguisher and put out the fire in the dumpster, and of course, when you do that, now you're pissing off the crowd.
Right. So
Because
that's what singled him out.
Yeah.
Okay.
And my theory is that Rosenbaum is also like 5'6". He's short.
Mhm.
All the other dudes were older dudes, bigger dudes. Kyle's 17. He's the youngest baby-faced dude.
Mhm.
And I pretty much can say I would put money that Rosenbaum picked him. He'd be like, if I push that dude, I bet he wouldn't use his gun.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
he probably picked the weakest link
It was
in that
a
group.
bullying move.
It was a bullying move. He
Yeah.
picked the weakest link in that group, and he rolled the dice on that kid wouldn't do anything if I started pushing him around.
Yeah.
So, and the unknown issue is like what happened between that scene, and there's several other, you can see in that video, other protesters on the Antifa and BLM side have guns, like handguns,
Uh-huh.
right? So it's not like they didn't have guns either. So, but anyway, fast forward to when, for some reason, Kyle is running away. So he's trying to exit the situation. Rosenbaum is chasing him.
Mhm.
And in a previous doctored video, it looks like a Molotov cocktail, but it's not. It's just a bag. And it doesn't matter because Kyle was ahead and the bag landed behind him. But Kyle ran into a parking lot and was cornered by Rosenbaum, who, despite being short, he's still a grown man.
Yeah.
Like far stronger than Kyle. And so you have to take into age and disparity of force.
Sure.
Right? And you gotta ask yourself, why is an unarmed man chasing a guy with a rifle?
Mhm.
Like, that doesn't make sense. Like, as far as I know, Kyle didn't do anything to agitate anybody else.
Mhm.
So why was he singled out
Right.
by this guy?
Mhm.
So of course, Kyle runs to the corner, sees he's trapped, and that guy's closing, and he shoots Rosenbaum. An interesting fact that the coroner said was that he was actually shot from behind.
Rosenbaum was?
Yes. So they tried to pull the bullet from his back. Someone was probably shooting at Kyle, but shot Rosenbaum instead.
But we know that wasn't Kyle's bullet?
Yes, it was a handgun bullet. So Kyle dropped him. He went down. And then what did Kyle do? What was Kyle's first action?
Yeah, I mean, my understanding is that he ran for the police to report
No. Interestingly, the first thing he did is he stopped right there to try to provide aid. And he called on the phone, which I think it was the police. He goes, I just shot somebody.
Yeah.
Now, if someone who wants to go kill protesters, they don't call the police and tell them on themselves.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like, you know, everybody's trying to like demonize him, but at every turn he was not the aggressor and trying to do the right thing. So he stopped there, and when that happened, of course, the crowd saw it, but he stayed there for a minute. I think he was definitely, if the crowd didn't see that, I think he would have definitely provided aid to that dude, right? But he sees this big crowd, because you can hear in the crowd, someone get him.
Yeah.
You know, that's the guy who shot him. So now the crowd just sees that kid shoot Rosenbaum.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Small detail, Rosenbaum was a piece of shit pedophile rapist, by the way. But that's irrelevant for that moment.
It is irrelevant, and I don't know how do you know this? I mean, how do you...
Oh, got a criminal record. He
Oh, he
raped a
does.
12-year-old when he was like, I don't know.
Yeah.
2012. So anyway, that's irrelevant because he didn't know that.
Yeah.
So then he sees this crowd now going for him. So he, on the phone, you can hear him clearly say, I shot somebody. I shot somebody. So he's running, and he's running toward the police, right? So then it cuts to a different video where you see him running away. Again, there's a crowd chasing him. He's not firing willy-nilly into the crowd, You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's like, he's a scared, shitless 17-year-old.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And he's running to the police for help. He falls down, and then he gets jump kicked by a guy, and then a guy with a skateboard wings it at his head, which, if you wing a skateboard, that's assault with a deadly weapon.
Sure.
You're allowed to defend yourself with deadly force to prevent your skull from being cracked open. So then Kyle shoots him with one shot, and all of his shots are well aimed, by the way. They may have been not like on his cheek, but he was picking his shots. Like, he's not like,
Yeah, just spraying.
yeah, he's not like, he's not pulling that trigger indiscriminately.
Yeah.
He's taking his time, and the third person that he shoots was a guy who came up with a gun drawn. It's a Glock 26. Came up to him, and then after he shot the guy in the chest, he swiveled to him when he's on the. This is all when he's on the ground too. Swiveled to him. The guy he paused up, right, and Kyle pauses there too, right. That guy stops. Kyle stops. That guy started forward again in an aggressive manner with his firearm. You'll notice he's right-handed with his gun in his hand, and so Kyle sees that and shoots him, and it blows his bicep up.
His bicep, yeah, that was a crazy image.
And then, so immediately again, Kyle gets up, runs away again. So he's still not being the aggressor. He's only being defensive, and every action he's taking is defensive.
Right. So great. So that's a good recap of the story, and I think it's probably a good recap that maybe a lot of people won't have necessarily heard, especially if they were just watching the mainstream media. But my question still remains: is would the situation have gone down that way if they hadn't been openly carrying? And that's that for me is
who's they, like
this
the
group
whole group
that Kyle is with.
Well, that gas station would have been torched. That man's livelihood would have been destroyed.
So that's that's an interesting thought. Then you just have to ask yourself questions about what are the values here between someone's business, building, which is livelihood. That's real. That's very real, and lives.
Right.
And what do we want to choose to value as a society? As a nation, what do we want to choose to value? Do we want to choose to? Is it really mean that much to us to protect that building, even in the face of pedophile rapists dying? And we have to ask that question,
So, but the problem with that is I think, right, so like when it's always like that, it's the gun control debate. Is it one child's life worth it?
Say more about that. What do you mean?
Like, the gun control people always use the thing of like, you should get rid of all your guns because if it would save one child's life, it would be worth it.
Right. Yeah, that because somebody's accidental shootings, is that the...
I mean, just in general, like, people like hate guns so much, they don't want anybody to have guns.
Yeah, well, that's a ridiculous argument because gun control just means that the people you don't want to have guns have guns.
No, I mean, they want, like, nobody to have guns.
Nobody to have guns. Well,
because they're like, if it stops one saves one life, it's worth it.
Well, honestly, if they could truly guarantee that nobody had guns, I would consider that as an argument. But you can't guarantee that.
Well, what happens when you take that equalizer away?
The equalizer being, who are you trying to equalize against? If nobody has guns, then who are you equalizing?
So then you're just ruled by the strongest and fastest.
Because you're saying as a force multiplier that now a 70-year-old man in his house can defend himself against a 26-year-old,
right?
6'5", very strong individual,
exactly.
Or yeah, I see what you're saying.
Sexual assault, rape.
Yeah. Well, so this also brings a really good point up, which is and this is how we're devolving right now as a nation. We're devolving into this, these base animal instincts, and we're clearly seeing decisions being made on the ground based on those instincts. for me, for some reason, it seems like there's not a lot of recourse. And I think maybe that's what you were saying is why this group was sort of there and armed, openly carrying, is because there wasn't a lot of recourse. You know, there's no protection there. I mean, what is law enforcement understaffed, underfunded to deal with this kind of situation?
Yeah,
because clearly the First Amendment guarantees that everyone there who is truly there to protest gets that right.
Yeah, but you'll notice in the Constitution it says peaceably assemble.
Yeah, that's right. And so there's a lot of non-peaceable assembly going on, and I'm wondering why these people feel the need to show up armed to protect a business that should be being protected by taxpayer dollars, right?
That's a slippery slope.
How so?
What is the taxpayer going to be like paying for, and how many?
Paying for the police to show up and protect the business.
There's not enough. It goes back to that saying of like the government that can provide you with everything has the power to take it all away.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why would you want your government that powerful that it could protect every house, every business with police?
Well, generally, we do expect that because we expect lower levels of crime than what we're seeing right now, right? So what we're seeing right now is an unusual situation that is sort of overwhelming our capabilities to handle it. And in that sense, and here's maybe to the point, is if it is our First Amendment right to peaceably assemble, and you want to go and protect a business, because this is the same for both sides. This is the same for the way these people are so-called protesting right now, and people who are protesting the protesting, mm-hmm. which is this group that Kyle was a part of, to show up and lock arms in front of a business without, to peaceably do so, mm-hmm. right?
What do you think would happen to them?
Well, what happened to black civil rights activists in the South when they peaceably protest?
Yeah, they got their ass.
They got beat down.
Yeah, killed.
But it made a point. It made a point, and that point changed things. You know, say what you want about the state of race in this country today, it is not the same as it was in 1960.
No, I agree, yeah.
And the reason why such great gains were made is because of Dr. Martin Luther King and his outspoken call for peaceful protest.
I have to look into that and look into the history of that more. It's on me. But I would say that they had the massive support of the population, I believe, behind them to change that, didn't they?
They didn't. Not in the places where they were protesting. So not in Selma, Alabama. Mm-hmm. Not in Oxford, Mississippi. Not in the places where...
I know but I'm just talking like the rest of the U.S.
I think that there was a very strong case being made sort of maybe north of the Mason-Dixon line for civil rights.
So I know it took a while for it to move down.
It took a long time,
yeah.
But the fact of the matter remained is that it was their moral, it was the upstanding presentation of character that made the biggest impression, I think, on us as a nation in our hearts, literally.
So, what would that look like today?
Well, I think what it could look like today is, let's take the same group of people that were there strapped that night, there without guns, standing in front of that business saying, no.
Okay.
And maybe they get beat down and the business gets torched anyway, but people see that and people identify with that. People say, there's clearly a right and clearly a wrong here. Mm-hmm. And we can't question who was in the right and who was in the wrong. There's no question anymore.
I can see that on like a global view, mm-hmm. Like the repercussions of that incident were to happen, but then you have to then it comes down to look at it like on a micro level, where it's an individual. Okay, so like, what happens to an individual's right of self-defense?
Right. Well, that's a great question, and again, that for that particular event, again, we have to go back to, well, we don't know if he would have been targeted in the same way had he not been openly carrying, right? So we don't know about that, but we could say that if that group decided to band together, if somebody were to gather onto one member of the group and the rest of the group came in and just to stand guard, I mean, unfortunately, there's a good chance they would have taken some blows. But what are you willing to do for peace? You know, for true peace? Like, what were the Black civil rights activists in the '60s willing to take to get thrown in jail, to get beaten with batons, to get sprayed with water hoses, to, you know, to say, this isn't right. This isn't right. And I think it's weird because we're sort of almost flipping the script on that in some ways, or it could seem that way in a situation like this, where it's like, you can't torch this business. This person doesn't deserve this.
Right. I think, I don't know, this would definitely raise some interesting questions. Like, what if you went to like one of the 1960 protests and you just handed all the Black people rifles? Like, okay, cool, now what are you gonna do now?
I think they had that option. You know, certainly there were more extreme groups during that time, Black Panthers and people like that, were much more militant
they came after them.
about how they sort of approached this. But I think, and again, you're right, I wasn't there either, right? So I don't know. But what again, this goes back to what the congressman was saying in the speech that we saw, that was the thing that captured the hearts and minds of the nation, was to see peaceful protest in the face of violence.
It's weird because I can honestly say, from my side, it's like you're drawing a parallel between the civil rights protests, and movement, and us today, whereas our side sees it as like colonial and British.
Yeah, I see that. But right, it's all stories. We're all telling ourselves stories.
Sure.
Right? And it's interesting because clearly, and I want to make this point, what I'm doing is flipping the script and saying your side, which would be the side that most people out there might call the racists, right, have the option to employ the exact same strategy that the other side was employing in the 1960s, right? So to fight against racism. The fact of the matter is if the true goal is to protect and nourish and engender life, right? This man has a business, his life depends on this, we will not let you destroy it. To truly exhibit that in the highest sense, I think, and this is my opinion in this moment, or I'm just exploring this anyway, is to say I will not lower my own values, in order to, I won't let the values of myself as an individual not match the values of what it is I'm trying to protect. In other words, the values of how I conduct myself in this interaction need to match the value of what it is that I'm trying to protect and what my intention is in protecting it, which I think is pretty powerful stuff.
It's weird because I can remember like kind of thinking that when I'm not trying to patronize you at all, by the way, but I remember thinking that like
when you were younger.
When I was, yeah.
I'm way older than you.
I know, that's why I feel bad saying it.
Yeah, that's all right.
But I don't know, I just like now I think of that and I just think like, I think the other side doesn't care. They would just kill you without a second thought and you'd be a statistic, and you know what I mean? Like that, I feel like that can only work if the other side saw the humanity in you, and they don't.
But the people did not see the humanity in the Black people protesting in the Civil Rights Movement. And the whites in the South that were truly perpetuating the racist state did not see they thought that this was a lower class of human beings.
Sure.
And it was through their actions, that they showed themselves to be not just equal, perhaps greater than, at least in that moment, they were showing themselves to be greater than.
But wasn't it the U.S. government and military that forced all those changes?
You mean to civil rights? Yeah,
Yeah, like disintegration, all that stuff.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So what did they have going protecting that girl going into school?
What do you mean?
Remember when who was the girl
who tried to go to school? I can't remember her name. Tried to go to school. Was that at Ole Miss?
Yeah, something like that.
Or there was.
It was like an elementary or middle school. I thought it was maybe it was.
There was a couple that actually happened at UGA too, but Ole Miss was the biggest one. That was, I'm sorry, I can't remember their names, but yeah.
But I mean, in the end, you still had to have men with rifles defending what was right.
Yep.
You know, you can't. I don't think you can, and nor should you go all the way to one side. You know, and I get what you're saying. You know, like you need to demonstrate that deal, and that's why I think Kyle's situation is so unique, because Kyle does embody, and his actions embody what we feel. Mm-hmm. It's like we don't want to hurt or shoot anybody, nobody. Like, this is purely for the preservation of our life, and that life includes how we live and how we feed ourselves and house ourselves. Like, those are intrinsic to me living, right? And we feel that that's under threat, and we will defend that.
Yeah, I get that. I totally get that. And to your point about violence being the ultimate equalizer, like you said, the National Guard had to enforce. You know, they had to bring guns and tanks.
They're like, hey, you're going to beat this girl, and we're going to shoot you.
Yeah, that's right. I think what we hope as a society, if we want to all live together, that the people that are employed to implement violence are doing so in service to something we've all agreed to. So everybody knows the rules.
Right. Well, that's I'm going to add on to that, and that's true. And this is why the violence is escalating, because the government, the people in power, are not putting it in check. It's falling to the citizens, and for us, we've been going through a boom. Like, you know what I mean? Like, the economy was awesome before Corona hit. I mean, it wasn't like super great, but whatever. You know, on the whole, the trend was like stock market's up. Everybody's like,
right.
You know what I mean? And so it's fallen to the citizens personally, who have never seen, a lot of them have never seen combat, like never bought a gun before, are now having to like defend their lives and their livelihood, you know, and they're scared and all that stuff. So we're holding back so much, I think. Like, we're really being super conservative with how we show our force, right? And we're not doing it in an organized way, not the best way, I think. But if you had the like U.S. National Guard, and they just, anything that got violent, and they stamped that out, says no, you can't do that,
right.
You know, with overwhelming force, you know, and then once it stopped, they pulled back, and then, because I know there's abuses on both sides,
sure,
you know, but they need to show their own restraint and say, you can protest, but you can't do that, right? If you do that, that's crossing a line, and there's going to be consequences, right? And so, but there hasn't been, so that's why you've seen this violence escalate, because they're like, it's like a kid, you know, they're like pushing you, like, oh, what are you gonna do now?
Right.
You know, do this, cool, I'm gonna push you harder now.
Yeah.
Right? And so, and not that we like hero worship Kyle, but we see him as like, okay, like, if you keep pushing, there's gonna be more of that.
Yeah.
You know, we don't want more of that, but you're choosing it. And again, just like Kyle's situation was a microcosm of the greater conflict that might be happening. It's like, you know, you're chasing us down, you're calling us this, you're calling us that, and we're racist and we're awful people, but we're the ones basically letting you say that. You know, and we're taking it. We're like, okay, whatever.
Right.
You know what I mean? And now you're chasing us, and we're gonna try to avoid it. We don't want to deal with it. You know, we're just trying to leave the situation. But if you keep pushing, this is what's gonna happen. And we're gonna show you a show of force. We're gonna do something, and then we're gonna pull back. We're gonna be like, okay, that's you know, that's you had a taste of what's coming.
Yeah.
Right.
I think what you're talking about is essentially is force dynamics, and I think there's no way to avoid it, and I think that's why. And look, I'm not the only person to be saying this. There's a lot of people saying this. Like, man, you're picking on people who have more guns than you and know how to use them.
More training.
Sure,
I mean,
way
this
more
is like, what was this? He goes, a 17-year-old kid, and then the other two guys that he slotted, again, not that the backgrounds of these people matter, but he killed a wife beater and then a felon who, the guy with the gun shouldn't even have a gun, considering our laws. Right? So, like, so the joke is, like, a 17-year-old kid with absolutely no training slotted 2 felons, and a felon, a wife beater, and a pedo. And it's like, imagine what 4 or 5, like, vets could do.
Yeah. So again, it goes, it's just like, it's a strange, it's a different game. What the deal is it's a different game, and people don't understand
the
seriousness. They don't understand the rules. They don't understand the dynamics.
They think because the police and government are not doing anything.
They think because they're pissed off, they can do whatever they want.
Exactly.
And look, that applies to everybody. It also applies, in my mind, it also applies to showing up open carrying to somewhere when if you end up in a situation like that, especially if you know the force dynamics, it's almost like you have more responsibility.
This is true. I believe that. So that's actually, it's funny because you say that, because a lot of side in my group now, because of that incident, right? So our question was like, okay, now that happened, in the beginning we're like, fuck yeah, like finally someone pushed back a little bit. You know, like you touch the hot stove, you get burned, you know? So now, but we're like, so in the beginning we're kind of cheered that on, and I think we're like yes, finally, you know? But now it's like, we understand that again, it might do this, right?
Right.
So obviously we don't want that.
Yeah.
So we're kind of like, okay, like there's a lot of these calls now from my own groups, like, you know, don't escalate by being there and being overt.
Yeah.
You know, like.
Good, I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Because you see it play out, and the reality is that's the only way it can play out.
Right.
Eventually it's always gonna go there. And so I'm really glad to hear that.
I mean, there's still a large group of people that are just like, fuck it, let's get this started, and we'll see who's left at the end.
I'm sure that there are, man, but that is ridiculous, dude. Again, I've said this to you many times.
Yeah.
They don't want that.
That's one thing we
think
do.
They want that, but they don't.
That's one thing we do agree on.
Yeah. That's crazy talk, and it's, you know, that's chaos, and that's chaos on both sides of the equation. And we don't want to live in that society because we love each other fundamentally. We love our families. We love our children. We don't want our children growing up in.
Well, I think we all love order.
Yeah, we do, and we need it.
We want to create order ourselves.
Yeah.
But what was I gonna say?
Well, you know, I think what's interesting about this is, again, I keep going back to this, but if you took that. Because I really do, you know, I think like, we've talked about Byron, we're going to have to tag Byron Rogers.
Yeah, Byron Rogers, you got some good shit.
Yeah, man. But if we talk, you know, that idea of being a protector, right? If we took that and applied that, because I think, look, to some degree, I think Black Lives Matters are people who feel like they're protectors too, right? Like they're trying to protect Black lives. They're trying to protect people who are being targeted because of the color of their skin. I think that you know, people are out protecting these businesses because they don't believe that the business should get, you know, I think we all have this inherent sense that we're trying to protect something.
Yeah. Well, so it's a weird kind of double-edged sword because a lot of us have guns to protect ourselves and our families, right? But I've been kind of thinking about this, and someone, I was actually on one of Tony Blauer's posts that he reposted from Mr. Jiu-Jitsu.
Oh, was that a recent one? Maybe today or something?
So Mr. Jiu-Jitsu is like, all these people that are going out to protest or protect businesses, they're dumb, they're inciting riots. And I can see his point. You know, he's like, but my guns are for me and mine only. And I actually wrote back to Tony, who reposted that, and I was like, really? Because I'm pretty sure like our founding fathers wouldn't say the same thing. You know, like what I said, they didn't believe in me and mine only. If me and mine only applied to everybody,
Right.
we wouldn't have survived as a nation. Right.
So that is a great point, and I think that's why I think these kinds of conversations are important, because if we keep pointing at fingers and creating sides, then we forget that we're actually all in it for the same thing, which is to protect us all, to protect our nation,
Right.
and the values that this nation was founded on, and that we want everyone to have a seat at the table, an equal seat at the table, if they show the kind of character that is deserving of a seat at the table.
Yeah, I want to read what I wrote because it was actually really good. No, I can't. Mr. Power. It's way down there. So I said, I get his point, but for how long will we stay silent while they scream at us that we're racist? How long will we watch and do nothing while our neighbors' businesses burn to the ground just because it's not me and mine? I said, and guess what, dude? At some point, the hippy-dippy saying, we're all one, is going to ring true. Will we say it in beautiful triumph and unity because we stood up to evil, or will we say it all shackled together because we only focused on me and mine?
Yeah.
You know, it's like, I get why people think that going to protect businesses is dumb, but I can also see why it's important, because it's about community, it's about your fellow man.
Absolutely. No, I think it's super important, man. I mean, I agree 1000%.
Like, and nobody on our side gives a shit what color you are.
Yeah.
Like, if someone was like, if lesbian protest was like, dude, this is fucked up, I want to help stop, I guarantee you someone would give them their rifle and be like,
Right.
Cool, man, stand in line.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Well, and here's the thing is I want to draw that distinction between the people who are out there burning and looting
sure.
and the people who are protesting, because I don't believe that anyone who's truly out there to protest against racial injustice and support racial equality wants to burn businesses down either.
Well, for a long time, our side went to protect protesters, but because we were white and we were armed, which is not a normal, let's say, black cultural thing, you know, to go like that, you know, that was looked on with like a huge amount of fear and stuff like that. And so like we tried, you know, we were just pretty much from the get-go labeled white supremacists because they thought we were there to like put them down. And we're like, no, we hate cops too.
Interesting.
Like, no, we're on, like, we support Black Lives Matter, like, we, you know, all that stuff, but, like, that just didn't happen on a large scale, you know, it was just not welcome, not accepted, and,
Well, because I think maybe to some degree, again, it goes back to, well, if you're here to support peaceful protesters, why are you bearing arms?
Well, Teddy Roosevelt said, speak softly and carry a big stick.
Certainly one way to go about it. Cool, man. Well, I really appreciate your time and your willingness to have this conversation. And, you know, I think it's an important conversation for people to have. And I think, you know, there's probably a lot of people, I hope there's a lot of people who hear this who can look at the issues, maybe see something a little bit differently.
Well, I just hope they look at both sides and realize even if you're on one side or the other side has a right to exist and have their own views. You know, as long as, like, what was it, the libertarian principle of non-aggression, right? The NPAP, non-aggression principle. It's like you can do and say what you want because that's your right, as long as they don't violate other people's rights or property. And I wish so many more people understood that. You know, like,
that's the foundation of civil society.
Human interaction.
That's the foundation of civil society, and that's what, no matter how you organize, once you organize, that has to be a foundational principle.
Right.
And
people don't want that anymore.
well, some people clearly don't, or or they think that they don't want it as long as they're the perpetrators affecting somebody
Right.
else.
Yeah.
Somebody comes on their turf and in their backyard and starts smashing their windows, it's going to feel a lot different. Now, granted, you know, that's looking at the racial history in this country, that's a different thing, right?
Right.
Because rights have been infringed upon massively, based solely on the fact of
Yeah, and I'm not saying there's not systemic racism.
there is. There's 100. I mean,
Yeah.
look, we didn't get into that because I assume
Right, I
it's
mean,
just a given, right?
It's a huge, so a different social issue.
Yeah,
to talk.
right.
But I mean, like, I'm not, just because I'm advocating for my side or the right per se, like, it's not like we don't think there's not systemic racism or like there's injustices or stuff like that. It's like, we just want you to peaceably assemble.
Yeah. No, I think
Not infringe on the rights of the other people, no matter
Clearly.
who they are.
No, what we've been talking about today is not about the issues that seemingly sort of ignited this, but what we're talking about is the manifestation of how this is playing out. in our
Misdirected
society.
energy.
Yeah, there's a lot of misdirected energy all the way around, and it's so unfortunate because we're not talking about the issues themselves, you know, but the issues themselves are so complex that it would be really difficult to talk about in a setting
Yeah,
like this.
I
I
mean,
mean, this is, you know, this is really deep stuff that requires really smart. This is the beautiful thing, though. I always say this. I talk about it in terms of environmental issues, but I mean, there's a space station floating around this planet right now. Like, if we can create that, if we can come up with a way to do that,
And we're gonna go to Mars.
surely we can come up with a way to
We're
fucking
probably
deal
gonna
with
put
these
humans
issues.
on the Mars before we die.
Yeah. And I don't know, my take on it all is like, we got no business going fuck up Mars until we figure our shit out here, you know? And I think our minds are the best minds and the best hearts, and the most money and the resources, I think, personally, we ought to be spending on the issues that we ain't figured out right here in front of us before we go flying off to another planet. Cool, brother.
Cool, that was awesome.
Man, I appreciate you, man.
No worries.
Yeah.
You too.